Welcome to Spare Change News TV. My name is Sam Baltrusis. I am the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. Joining me today is Peter Grossi. Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much.
So Peter is one of the many organizers of a new donation. It's for coats and for clothing. So tell me a little bit about what you're working on.
Well, it's an expansion of the service that we were providing in providing meals for those who are homeless and in transition with transitional housing through the Pine Street Inn. And what we've done in the past is donated clothing as well as meals. And it's really been helpful, and they really seem to like it. So with a couple of the others, Mo and Bill, they decided to set up a drop box to have additional clothing.
What's the name of your group? So it's
the Sufi Service Committee.
Sufi Service Committee. And so the actual event is going to happen this Friday?
Yes, that's correct.
So September 18th, it's from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. You guys were able to get the mayor of Cambridge to go.
We were, yes.
So how did that happen?
Well, it seems that Mo already had some connections with the mayor's office, and he knows some of the people in there already. So it wasn't hard for him to set up an appointment, and Mayor David Meyer was more than willing to come on that day.
So it's not the the Nor what's the name of the
Nor Oriental Rugs.
Nor Oriental Rugs, and that's near Alewife.
Yes.
Okay, and it's on 769 Concord Avenue in Cambridge, Mass. So it's a drop box. So we're gonna talk a little bit about why people it's important for we have winter coming up and winter
Correct.
coats.
Yes.
What have you seen this type of donation box in action in the past?
If you go around anywhere in Cambridge or Boston, you could see some of those drop boxes where people pick up clothing, be it Goodwill and some of the other lesser-known charities. I've been seeing them popping up more often. So I think it's a really great idea that a couple of our own guys ended up coming up with that idea.
I think it's great. Something like coats. Our winter was so bad.
It really was.
The last winter was just overwhelming. And things that we don't think about are coats, food. There's other things that people take for granted that the homeless population have to deal with. And clothing. Like shoes is a huge deal, especially during the winter as well. Now, do you take shoe donations?
I believe we do. Yes.
Okay.
We've donated shoes in the past.
Okay. So shoes, coats, clothing, drop off your clothing. It's going to go to a good cause. Now, the people that are going to benefit from this, is it going to be tied to the Pine Street Inn, or does it matter who's?
Well, it really doesn't matter because we have other communities that we reach out to as well.
Okay. So it's going to reach out to Cambridge's homeless population.
Oh, yes, of course.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So tell me, what other stuff that you're involved with? This is the Sufi group. How did you get involved with that spiritual movement?
Well, that ended up being a personal spiritual quest for me. I was well aware of the poet Rumi and his writings of the Mathnavi, and just reading his poetry and his stories ended up having a profound effect on me years before. Then I found out that there was a group in Boston, and I said, really? I didn't think there was. So I ended up checking it out, calling over. I was welcomed with open arms, and I've been there ever since.
So a big part of the spiritual is to give back to the community.
Yes.
And so something like this is fits in that.
Yeah.
So anything else, like what other projects? What are you looking with this? I know it's starting with a box, but hopefully it'll lead to bigger things where it can help the community.
Correct.
Like what are your plans? Like the ribbon cutting on this Friday, but what's next for you guys?
Well, I would say pretty much taking it as it comes, depending on the amount of volunteers that we get too.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no shortage of them either. Sometimes it's a little bit tougher in the summer. I mean, people want to go out more in the summer, and who would blame them? I mean, the weather's so nice. But as winter comes, there ends up being a lot more spare time, and I think that's where more of the need is at
Right.
that point in time as well. So I think we'll keep going along as we do with food donations, with that leftover food that for various stores are more than willing to donate for a good cause. I mean, it's better than throwing it in the trash and possibly contributing to the rodent problem as well. It's much better that it could go to those who truly need it.
So the clothing donation, so it's not just the homeless population; it could also be like low income as well.
Well, don't quote me on that. I suppose that's something to consider in the future.
Right.
I mean, we've been helping those who are in transition,
Okay.
with those who have temporary housing where they have their own apartments and they stay there for maybe an average of 2 years, and it's a communal living place
Right.
where we're able to bring over bread and pastries, and then whoever is scheduled to cook that week ends up bringing in a nice dish that we could all sit down and have a meal together. And I mean, it's just not just the meal or serving food. I mean, because we eat and drink with them, and we all just sit around as if it's Sunday dinner, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So anything else? So like what are your thoughts on Cambridge in regards to being progressive and sort of the diversity of Cambridge? What draws you to Cambridge?
Oh, yeah, it's really different. I mean, you get to meet all kinds of people with all walks of life, the diversity, like you had mentioned, and various opinions on various topics. And I think with that kind of dialogue that is possible, we can come up with a lot of solutions for many different things. I mean, you got Harvard, you got MIT,
Right.
the hub of the world, as it's called.
And I mean, I think we're really lucky to live in the city. I actually live in Somerville, but not in Cambridge.
Uh-huh.
But this is a very progressive area where there's so many different cultures and you learn about different things. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
But we also have a homeless population that we have to listen to and talk to. Have you said you had dinners with the people that are in transition?
Yes.
Have you reached out to people like that maybe that are unsheltered on the streets of Cambridge?
I think we've been limited in that regard, and there are more than a lot of other services to do that. I mean, I would say that it's good not to duplicate services.
Yeah. No, I was wondering if you had it because
I've done that in the past in my church days, like when I used to go to Park Street. It was Starlight Ministries many years ago, where we used to end up having church outside as well. So I would say there were more than enough services to go around. There's no shortage of that either, and that's what makes the Metro Boston area such a great place.
I this past winter when it was so bad, I actually went out, just talked to people on the streets, and a lot of them needed the basics like shoes and coats. So like my interaction with them, we tried our best. There was a group called COPE that we a group of women and people and volunteers who came together and we got a backpack worth of with the various things that they needed and were given to the people. So it was sort of like the private sector like rising up and giving back to the community. And that that is sort of, we see that as a recurring theme. We have a lot of ministries opening up various places like the Friday Cafe in Cambridge, and there's Boston Warm in Boston, where you have the private sector stepping up and helping the community.
Yes.
But what about city-run shelters and all that? So it's kind of, there's some issues with that, but that's to say for Spare Change News. So let's reiterate the time.
Please.
Okay, so the ribbon cutting ceremony is this Friday. It's September 18th. It's from 3 to 4 p.m. It's at Nor Oriental Rugs. It's 769 Concord Avenue in Cambridge. That's near Alewife. Now, if people want to come check it out, if they don't have a car, they could take the Alewife train.
Yes. It's right past the Social Security office, a few blocks away from there.
Awesome. So we are expecting our next guest, Alex Ramirez, who is one of our reporters and online editor with Spare Changes, on his way. We're going to play one of our earlier interviews with Alex, and he's as soon as he gets here, we'll actually bring him on camera. So hold on one second. So thank you so much, Peter, for your time.
All right, wonderful.
How has your reporting changed since I've been editor?
Well, I think it's definitely taking on a much more general homelessness angle since you've come on board. Before that, immediately before you came on board, I was reporting a lot on the Long Island closure. I don't know if you want me to run that down real quick.
Yeah, I mean, the Long Island story actually is why I joined Spare Change News. The Long Island story was very emotionally connected to it. The bridge closed in October 8th, and on Long Island was the largest city-run homeless shelter in the city of Boston. So hundreds of people were affected by that closure. You're one of the first people to report on the Long Island Bridge before it even closed.
Yes, way back in about April or March of last year, I wrote about how the bridge was just not getting its funded, how it was in the middle of this intermunicipal dispute between Boston and Quincy. Quincy was particularly hostile to the bridge, and they put a lot of roadblocks whenever the bridge needed funding for repairs. But there was just so much conflict, at least a couple decades, of just these disputes between the mayor of Boston and the mayor of Quincy. Mayor Menino did, to his credit, he did manage to often get the money secured, but it would usually take months. I think the most recent one before the closure lasted from about November of 2013 to March of 2014. It ended a month before the article came out.
And I actually worked, because I write books, I write ghost books, and my fourth book is on the Boston Harbor, and I would spend the summer going in ferries, giving historical tours in the harbor, and I would pass by that bridge, and I'm like, I would say, tear down that bridge, because it was obviously a mess. But what kind of confuses me is why the mayor chose not to ferry in people to the island, as opposed to tear down the bridge and then actually build the Southampton Street shelter.
Yeah, well, a lot of people were confused why they wouldn't just ferry people in. The main reason the city gave was that in the winter, the waters around the harbor are just very dangerous, and that it's not very safe to navigate them. And they also brought up the problems of if you needed an ambulance on the island, how do you get people off of the island? There were ambulances running back and forth from the island when the bridge was up.
Right.
And there are ambulance ferries, but again, I think it's the choppiness of the winter waters that was the main concern, at least according to the city.
Well, it makes a lot of sense now, but we're talking like October, November, December, when the waters,
yes.
I mean, I was in a ferry up until the late of October 30th, giving a ghost tour on a boat. But still, I mean, like it was still navigatable. And like the fact that the harbor hasn't frozen over in hundreds of years, and like we now see, because of the craziness, it is freezing over now. But for years it didn't. 100 years it didn't freeze over, and there's actually patches of ice. So it probably would be safe to take a ferry over to Long Island now. But it still confuses me. Now, you wrote a story on Long Island being used as a shooting range for the Olympics. Tell me about that story.
Yes, well, when Boston 2024 finally released their proposal documents to the public, people noticed that in one of the PDFs regarding the proposed venues, Long Island was being proposed as a shooting range, as an Olympic shooting range, complete with about a 7,000 spectator venue. Now, the venue wasn't planned for the health campus, where the shelter and the detox center and other recovery programs are, but it was still a bit eye-opening, and it also proposed that spectators would be ferried over, which was also a little interesting considering the ferry controversy you mentioned earlier. The mayor did address it a bit during the first Olympic meeting, public Olympic meeting, a couple weeks ago. The date's escaping me. And he said that the plans for the Olympics and his plans for Long Island aren't related. And to an extent that's true, because Boston 2024 is a private organization. They would have made these plans on their own. That said, the PDF did say that the city had reviewed the proposal. So it's not clear how much the city knows about Long Island. What is clear is that it's still years from now before anything can be done. We don't even know if those services will return to the island. by the time we would even start building a venue there, should we even get the Olympics.
Well, I mean, for me, the story, and you're right, like the actual venue, if you look at the plan, is where Camp Harborview currently is.
Yes.
But they did mention, that the bid did clearly state that they would have people, cross the bridge that they're going to build, 2024, and then they also clearly stated that they would pay. Be wary of tearing down the historical significance of Long Island, which has a huge historical backstory. So this actually where the shelters were kept are buildings that date back many years, have a historical value to them. So they're of course not going to hold the shooting range there. But are they going to have a shooting range event on an island coupled with a shelter? I mean, it doesn't make any sense having guns and people and
It certainly sounds, I don't want to stereotype anyone who would use the shelter, but it's safe to assume that there'd be at least a handful of people with, PTSD. There's a lot of homeless veterans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not all of them are in our system, but a lot of them are on the streets at least. But some of them end up on Long Island. Even non-veterans can have PTSD. And being that close to a shooting range, to that many people, it kind of goes against the purpose. If they're held very early in the morning or early afternoon, the shelter might not be populated at that time during those hours. That would be my guess. I don't think they hold too many shooting events at night, but it's still logistically a little troubling to think about, I would say.
Yeah, I feel, this is what I feel. I feel like that they did want to use Long Island for the Olympics, and now they're sort of backpedaling on what's really, now that people have sort of expressed a huge emotional outpouring for the people that were taken off the island. In fact, the reason I became emotionally entangled with the men and women who were on Long Island in the shelter, primarily because I heard their story, and and like your story in Spare Change News and other stories that I read about the people and the lives that it affected, made me really want to help out. And actually, the reason why I joined Spare Change News was I reached out to one of the religious leaders of Boston, and I said, what can I do? Because I feel emotionally invested in these people. And she said, pray. And I did. And so I prayed, and actually someone emailed me with a job at Spare Change News, and my life has kind of changed since then. I've done 3 issues. So speaking of the religious leader, the late of like October 30th, giving a ghost tour on a boat. But
welcome back to Spare Change News TV. Again, my name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. Joining me now is Alex Ramirez. We just saw the first episode of Spare Change News TV with Alex on the show.
Yeah.
Boy, have things changed since then.
Man, a lot of memories from that. Man, a long way since then.
So what's interesting is Alex is... So since then you've been promoted to online editor.
Yeah.
And we were actually talking, because we were talking earlier with Peter with the Sufi group. They're opening up a coat drive. We have the 1 year anniversary of the Long Island Bridge closing. And so what are your, do you know what's happening? Like I know there's a celebration, the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, they're working on sort of a day-long commemorative. Do you any specifics on that?
I don't know too many specifics about that at the moment. I was gonna get more in touch with them, figure it out, but I'm sure there'll be some marching, some rallying. They have a bunch of chants. They got their Marty's Bridge just falling down.
Oh, really?
I'm sure, Cleve Ray, who's been on the show before and is going to be featured in the upcoming issue, I believe. He's certainly going to be a big voice there. It's how do you commemorate something like that? And it's been a weird year, and the place we're at right now, it's not totally, I think a lot of the larger community, not the homeless community, just the Boston community is kind of over it in some ways.
Right.
But, people in the addiction community, people who have loved ones in recovery, they're still, facing these challenges. And even a lot of the homeless people are still facing challenges. There's going to be problems with overcrowding again in the winter, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's, what's going forward, I think that needs to be the big part of this 1 year anniversary. I think that's what we really need to see from, activists, from advocates, is not just don't let this happen again, but let's really ramp this system up to something better.
Well, even like with Peter's coat donation box that we talked about earlier, like something as simple as collecting coats for the homeless
Yeah.
population makes a huge difference, and we can step up as a community. Unfortunately, the private sector has had to step. We've had to
Yes.
step up and do things to help our homeless brothers and sisters, and so it's one of those things that like do something, like go collect coats or reach out, join, like work with the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee, and hopefully, raise awareness in regards to what the homeless population actually deal with. So I know you mentioned Cleve
Yeah.
Ray. Cleve Ray's the new story that we had Cleve on the show. He actually announced a new initiative. It's a mentorship program. What are some of the things that you've seen? You talked about the addiction community, but sort of like the ripple effect of Long Island closing.
Well, I think some of the big ripple effects would be, I mean, the most obvious would probably be that we have a mainland shelter now,
Right.
as opposed to exporting everyone to an island for the night, which had its pros and cons. Some people really did, especially in the recovery community, like being out on the island separate. But I think some of the homeless didn't take getting bussed out too well.
Yeah.
I think it did send a bit of a message. So I think it's good to have something a little safer, more stable, mainland. I think the mayor's new Housing First initiative is a big ripple, but it's one that's still, it's still very new. It's still untested. I haven't even heard too much about where it's at the moment. So we still have plenty of unanswered questions, but we do have some promising improvements, I guess you could call them.
I see this, like there's an emphasis on the big picture, like housing first, but I
Yeah.
see sort of the small things like coats and showers and the basics
Right.
that people need on the day-to-day basis kind of overlooked.
Yes, and on that note, Boston Warm, they're preparing for a new year. I've been talking to a couple of them recently, and they're trying to figure out where they're at, where they are going forward. Do they want to become something more official, like a nonprofit? Do they want to kind of stay, a little more low key? Do they want to move closer to working with the city? Do they want to kind of stay independent? And we still have groups like COPE, like Hand Delivered Hope. They're still around. So I think everyone's kind of, I don't want to say at a crossroads, but they do have to figure out if they're going to stay what they're doing or if they're going to ramp it up now. And I think what we might see is more people getting involved. We might see more, coat drives. You never know what you'll see. A lot of ways to help out are very simple. They might even seem obvious almost, but they make a huge impact.
Like socks. Socks are
Socks.
huge.
Socks are huge.
Blankets. There was a Cambridge, was it a city councilor that raised blankets. So this is what I'm asking for the community as editor-in-chief of Spare Change News, dealing with the homeless population. It's a crisis level. The effect of Long Island still affects people are still on the streets. I'm just out in Central Square. A lot of people out there. Do something. Whether it's it's a coat drive, or if it's something as simple as joining, volunteering at Boston Warm, working with Cleve Ray at his initiative, Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee. Write a story for Spare Change News. There's so many things you can do to help the community, and every person's efforts are going to make a huge difference. And we have winter coming where they're predicting that it's going to be just as bad as last winter.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, because it was bad.
It was terrible.
It's really bad. And we are hopefully as a community going to step up, because I think that we were in shock when Long Island closed.
Yes.
So we didn't really know what to do, and people stepped up from that shock and did some amazing things.
Yeah.
And this is also, not only is it a memory for it not to happen again, but also it's to honor those who stepped up to help the community, like Boston Warm, like Cleve Ray, who was in the shelter.
Yeah.
A few days before he was homeless, went to the shelter, and then it was traumatizing.
Yes.
What happened to him, and now he was one of hundreds of people that happened to. So our goal as a publication that helps the homeless population is to put awareness on it, but also maybe help mobilize and focus on groups that are doing things that are going to help the community as we get closer to winter.
Yeah.
We have the Y2Y shelter opening up in Harvard Square, and that is going to be huge for the community. We had the two, Sam, who was one of the founders, and Sarah, who worked with this shelter. They're building it now. They're looking to open in November, so it's a great addition to what's happening in Cambridge. So, latest edition of Spare Change News. This is our fall arts edition. we have some hard hitting stories inside. I know it looks like it's Adina Menzel on the cover, but we definitely have your story in here. So what did you write this last issue? Oh, so he did a fantastic story on our street doctor.
Yep, Dr. Jim O'Connell, who also just got featured in the Globe recently.
Yeah, we scooped the Globe again. But another fantastic issue. And what this book is, did you read the book or were you?
I haven't gotten a copy of the book yet,
Okay.
and I wanted to go to one of the readings, but my schedule didn't really allow it.
And so what's next for you? So you're working on the Boston Worm story.
Yep, I'm gonna be touching base, hopefully with some more folks from there, seeing where they're at. I think it'd be a good fit for kind of a 1-year anniversary. We got some interesting tips about the shelters recently, and then on the more citywide basis, there's plenty of interesting studies going around.
We are planning a huge 1 year later commemorative edition of the Long Island Bridge closing for Spare Change News. So it's not this coming up Friday, which we're doing kind of a criminalization issue. This the one after, and do we know what date it is? It's in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So 3 weeks, look for that edition. It's going to be an amazing edition of Spare Change News. Alex is already working on the content, and we're very passionate about this. And that's why I joined Spare Change as editor, is to make a difference to those who are displaced from Long Island. So Alex, thank you so much again for being on the
Anytime.
show.
Thank you for having me.
And Alex has been fantastic. So